You're listening to the Tony Kinnett Cast on 93 WYPC.
WCYTV.
Here on the Daily Signal.
Good evening and welcome to the Tony Kinnett Cast here on the Daily Signal, nationally syndicated, first on 93 WIBC. We have some breaking information about a potential missile and drone strike on the U.S. airbase in Prince Sultan in Saudi Arabia. Several aircraft are reported damaged. We're not yet sure as to how many U.S. servicemen are injured or if there are some reports that say above 10. Some reports say just a few. One report says none at all. Reuters is saying something different than the Jerusalem Post, which is saying something different than PBS. We'll keep you updated as that news rolls in. In the meantime, there is another piece of news that is breaking at this very minute. After Virginia Foxx, the chair of the House Rules Committee, a representative who is not really in the mood for nonsense, got in front of her a rather strange deal from the Senate last night at 2:20 in the morning. So early this morning, I should say. Only a handful of your senators were on the floor. Most of the lawmakers already on their way out to go to a little 2-week Easter recess. And 5 senators, just 5 senators, 3 Republicans and 2 Democrats, pushed forward a Department of Homeland Security shutdown deal that somehow gave a bunch of the Democrats nothing in what they wanted, and also gave the majority of Republicans in this country, according to every piece of polling data, from the moderate Republican sectors in the Northeast all the way through to the Deep South and the Bible Belt, the most conservative of the conservative, between the Midwest and the South. None of the stuff that group wanted either. So what is this unpopular deal and what did it do? So here's this little bill and what the actual deal contained. It funded nearly all of the Department of Homeland Security, as in Transport or Travel Security Administration, airport screeners, the Coast Guard, FEMA, some cybersecurity and infrastructure security, and explicitly excluded funding for immigration customs enforcement and removal operations, major parts of Border Patrol. Some modest, sort of previously agreed upon items like money for body cameras for officers, but no restrictions or reforms. So here's the small group of 5. Again, 5 senators. We've been talking to you for weeks about how you may need 50 senators, 60 senators. So what in the world is this just 5 people? So while you were sleeping, at least I hope, Senator John Thune of South Dakota, Eric Schmidt of Missouri, Bernie Moreno of Ohio, who was presiding over the group of 5, Democrat Brian Schatz of Hawaii, and Democrat Andy Kim of New Jersey, passed this amended DHS funding bill by just a little voice vote at 2:30 a.m. Just I don't know, all of this debate, all of this arguing, again, a bunch of Republican senators who have been very against the idea of watering things down because Democrats chose to shut down the government. A lot of Democrats kind of in counter and in protest saying they were fine keeping it shut down forever. And we're going to talk about in a little bit, they want to go even further and they want to shut down ICE and they want to shut down the Department of Homeland Security entirely, permanently. And yet this got thrown over. So lest you be a little frustrated here, again, as a quick summary here, the key parts that they removed in this DHS deal that no one asked for, they removed Border Patrol funding. They focused on stripping basically anything other than Border Patrol at ports of entry. So you know the thing Americans voted for, Border Patrol between the ports of entry, like where people are crossing into the border, funding for that section of Border Patrol was reduced. That's the heart of Border Patrol enforcement. And that includes any and all overtime between ports of entry patrol that we just talked about, interdiction, field operation related surveillance and response activities, and that's on top of shredding ICE. So all of this through and said, the first congressman, I believe, to come out and decry this was Representative Andy Ogles of Tennessee, who had one of the best arguments, I think, of a lot of Republicans waking up to this complete disaster.
So what the Senate did last night was they passed a bill that did not fully fund the government, meaning Child Sex Trafficking Investigation Unit isn't funded. They didn't fully fund Homeland Security. So we're focused on amending the bill and putting that back in and we're going to add in voter ID in the process.
So now some have said, wait a minute, Tony, I thought you said that we couldn't do this stuff through reconciliation. Correct. What Representative Andy Ogles is saying is that the House has consistently, and we're going to get this from Mike Johnson in a minute, has sent over bills every single day, again and again and again and again. Speaker Johnson, and the House Freedom Caucus, working with the more moderate House caucuses on the Republican side of the aisle, have been sending out bills like Waffle House serves up your breakfast. Time and time again, right in front of everyone, consistent, thorough, everything in the bill out in front of all the committees.
They're cowardly, they didn't do their job, and now they left town. They should come back, and they should have to do their job.
Now, we're going to get to the whole cowardly and the leaving town thing in just a minute, but that's just Representative Andy Ogles. Speaker Johnson came out right in the morning as he's walking in. You can tell the dude is upset. The man has received a lot of flack over the last couple of years. But I will say that to come out immediately and say the Senate is ridiculous, that's not the R word that I was originally going to go with, that Senate Majority Leader John Thune did not check in with any other leadership. Reportedly, Thune didn't check in with the Trump administration. He didn't check in with House leadership. That's kind of the Democrat side of things. You know, he sounds rather furious over with the left side of the aisle. What does Speaker John Thune have to say to this? Because it is Republicans who put forward a very particular, very careful measure that funds the Department of Homeland Security. And the left announced that they wanted all of these various concessions. They wanted body cameras on ICE. They wanted Kristi Noem removed. They wanted the special warrant series of things that isn't really compatible with federal court or federal law and precedent, I should say. So with this point here, what does it have to do with the Democrats? Well, Chuck Schumer, after getting some of those concessions, still said no. He was just going to get it shut down permanently because more members of the Progressive Caucus and Democrat senators, again, we're going to show Ed Markey here in just a minute, are now just calling for ICE to just be completely abolished and destroyed anyway. So what did the House actually come forward and do? Speaker Johnson brought forward, and this ended up being endorsed by Trump a couple of minutes later, actually before Johnson was even done with the press conference, said, all right, clearly no one knows what they're doing, but Americans are suffering. This is a bother to Americans. They're still concerned about voter ID, which we're also going to get to. He said, so in the meantime, we're going to do a 60-day stopgap funding. Just fund DHS for 60 days. We're going to pass it out of the House, and we're going to get it over to the Senate so at least we can stop crippling the second most major American artery of transportation. Here's the Speaker of the House a little bit later with this proposal.
The Republicans are not going to be any part of any effort to reopen our borders or to stop immigration enforcement. We are going to deport dangerous criminal illegal aliens because it is a basic function of the government. The Democrats fundamentally disagree. The Senate Democrats have hoisted upon this appropriations process their radical, crazy agenda. We call it crazy because that's what it is. They want to reopen the borders, and they want to stop the deportation of dangerous criminal illegal aliens. We have to do these basic functions of government. We have to fund them in order to do them. In the last several days, we have recent examples of dangerous criminals in this country killing innocent Americans.
Correct, from the Speaker of the House. Now, again, this is a 60-day stopgap measure that would simply push things through May 22nd. Now, Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer is extremely angry about this. He's very, very unhappy. So he did what he always did. He didn't go to FedEx Kinko's because, he's going for Easter. He's leaving. He's saying, see ya. He made this big angry post where he said, a 60-day CR that locks in the status quo is dead on arrival in the Senate, and Republicans know it. We've been clear from day one. Democrats will fund critical Homeland Security functions, but we will not give a blank check to Trump's lawless and deadly immigration militia without reforms. Slit my wrists. But I will level with you here. We know this is a lie. And the reason we know this is a lie is because this was pitched by the House as a stopgap measure, as an alternative. Again, even Lindsey Graham and then Joe Kennedy and Ted Cruz put forward this method that would have done some of these particular things while ICE was then funded through reconciliation. Schumer said no. Now, some of you out there may say, wait a minute, Tony. Why is it that they're able to do a 5-person little slip through voice act nonsense, but they can't get this through? And the answer to that question is that they're really up against any last tricks in the kind of establishment that Thune can pull without just knocking over the filibuster and making things simple majority matters. Now, how is this going over in the House? Well, I told you, Virginia Fox and Representative Chip Roy of Texas, like a lot of Americans, are pissed. They are very, very salty. Radio crew, I'm sorry, we've kept you over on the commercial side. We're going to kick you guys over there while we continue on the live stream. Don't go anywhere. It's the Tony Kinnett Cast here on the Daily Signal. All right, now they're over in FCC commercial land. Here's what's going on right now with the bill. This is the House putting something forward, and, Chip Roy's kind of letting it fly.
I think the Chairwoman, Mr. Chairman, Chairman Cole, is it true that the United States House of Representatives, Republicans, have sent over to the United States House multiple times full funding for the Department of Homeland Security, including all operations?
I assume you mean United States Senate, and yes, it is.
Sorry. And in sending it over to the United States Senate, is it not true that the 53 Republicans of the Senate have multiple times voted for full funding for the Department of Homeland Security?
I believe that's the case.
So therefore, is it not true that there are precisely 7 human beings in the entire world that are holding up funding for the men and women who are serving our country in Border Patrol, in ICE, in FEMA, in TSA, and every other aspect of the Department of Homeland Security? 7 individuals necessary, 7 Democrats in the Senate necessary to get 60 votes.
May only be 5. I believe at least 1, I think 2 Democrats have voted. So it's a pretty substantial sort of mid-50s majority to fund the government.
Now, again, here's the issue, though. You hear a couple of these people going, well, let's not be hasty here. Let's say it's really not 7. It's more like 5 or 4. And the reason that you are seeing this is because there are a couple of Democrat senators and Republican senators who really like being seen as moderate. They like being seen as individuals who just kind of, go with the flow and are willing to, pitch in and help out and all this other kind of nonsense. Here's the issue with that. Americans don't believe that they are moderate. Americans don't care if you get out in front of a press conference and say, well, that's like actually why I'm really concerned about things. They want results. Americans don't like waiting in lines. They don't like dealing with nonsense. They don't like seeing crime on their streets. They don't like seeing unfriendly, unkind things on their TV. They want results. And right now, what you are seeing is a Senate that cannot deliver those results. They're already in campaign mode in front of a country, both left and right, that's not ready to be pitched to. They're not ready to be given endless ad nauseum campaign and empty promises. And we see this all the way over to the Save America Act especially, but I want to give you an example. One of these moderate senators who wants you to think that they're just like you is Senator Elisa Slotkin of Michigan. So Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche was asked very briefly about about the Democrats' demands. Hakeem Jeffries made this long Obama-William Shatner style speech about places that he didn't want ICE to go, under a box with a fox, in a train, on a plane, that kind of thing. And one of the places he said is he wants to keep immigration customs enforcement away from the polls, which has a lot of people, including the Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche, asking, well, hey, wait a second. Why do you want ICE away from the polls so bad at the same time that you're fighting voter ID? Why would you want that? And this upset Senator Elisa Slotkin. This is today. Quote, today's comments from Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche in favor of our ICE agents at our polling places is exactly why I made it a priority to ask Secretary Mullen in his confirmation hearing. Free and fair elections are blah, 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 blah. Americans aren't caring. They don't care. They're not interested in hearing the prissing and the preening and the whining when, again, the Department of Homeland Security is shut down. Now, the House has put forward a simple stopgap measure. Producer Josiah is keeping an eye on some of those updates here. It's very unlikely, though, that this even makes it out. The Rules Committee, Virginia Fox, doesn't appear to be a fan of it. It's probably going to hit a very quick House vote, and then it's going to get slapped right in the teeth. But that's not Chuck Schumer's biggest issue. His biggest issue isn't the moderates. His biggest issue is that on his side of the aisle, increasingly the new rung for Democrats to get out and preach, because they can't just say the thing and then let it go. No. They are taking the line of Representative Delia Ramirez, the new House firebrand who says that she wants ICE abolished. She wants the Department of Homeland Security abolished. Now that's seeping over into the Senate. We're going to cover that here in a second and some of these Iran war updates. A lot of news. Don't go anywhere. It's the Tony Kinnett Cast here on the Daily Signal.
It's the Tony Kinnett Cast on 93 WIPC.
Welcome back to the Tony Kinnett Cast here on the Daily Signal. We're keeping an eye on a couple of developing stories right now. Before I get back into some of the information on the House of Representatives, I do want to mention very quickly that a U.S. official has confirmed that an Iranian missile attack wounded several service members and damaged several so far as yet unnamed planes, although it's suspected they are part of the refueling craft at a base in Saudi Arabia. So that's at Prince Sultan Air Base. Now, right now, it's not clear how many troops were wounded or how severe those are. But this comes after some satellite imagery that appeared to show the damage to an aircraft that appeared online. Now, some of this particular photographic evidence so far is under a bit of contest because there's a serious misinformation campaign going on from at least 4 different locations around the globe. And we're going to get into that here in a little bit. I don't want to cheapen that conversation by covering that news short up front here. So to end this conversation about another breaking and developing story that we're following, the House getting ready to slap down this 5-senator voice vote, middle of the night, cobbled together deal to not fully fund the Department of Homeland Security and asking the House to rubber stamp it. The Senate side is giving Chuck Schumer a serious amount of heartburn. And the reason they're giving him a serious amount of heartburn is because more senators are now, in the middle of this midterm season, going out and not just saying that they want some reforms with ICE. They're just announcing they want ICE and maybe the Department of Homeland Security abolished entirely. Senator Ed Markey of Massachusetts, discount Bernie Sanders, got out there and said exactly this.
So we're still going to have a big battle over ICE. I believe ICE should be defunded. I don't think that ICE is any longer capable of existing because it is so corrupt at its core. But we still have to have that debate.
Just the idea that the stance to take right now is tearing it all down is not going to work with Americans. This isn't the kind of thing that Americans are looking for. But where's that coming from? Well, it's coming from the most popular members of the left. And these are the youths. The left has told themselves, you can't possibly disagree with these people because they're so energetic and young and like zesty and they're popular on social media. So when you have people like Zoran Mamdani that get out there and call for the most insane things known to man, people like Ed Markey and other Democrat senators can't do anything but parrot him or he'll be thrown to the same wolves. Here's Mamdani calling for, again, the exact same thing.
I think first and foremost, we're making clear that no one is above the law in this city, that everyone has to follow the rule of law. And I have made clear to the president, both in our private conversations and our public conversations, about the fact that I believe that ICE is a rogue agency. It's a reckless one. It's one that delivers nothing towards the furthering of the cause of public safety. And I've also been public about my belief that ICE is an entity that should be abolished. And that is critically important in our city where we've seen too many New Yorkers living in fear of even going to what would otherwise be routine immigration check-ins.
So let's get into a little of the fear right now. We're talking about all of the fear. Oh, Americans that are living under fear, the horrors and all this other nonsense. Americans do not feel this way. According to the polling data that we have right now in front of us, multiple sources, Americans do not believe that ICE is causing issues right now around the country. Americans believe that they are helping at airports that are currently under the threat of closure because of the mass number of TSA employees that are permanently quitting. Now, the president did sign an executive order today to pay the Transportation Security Administration employees out of a national emergency standpoint. Not quite sure how long it is going to take for some kind of a federal judge to rush in and throw up the red flag and go, you can't do that, but it's coming. Just so that you know, that is going to be stopped because federal judges in this country right now aren't actually considering federal precedent. And yes, crippling the entire American airline transportation network is considered a national emergency. It has been used 5 times in the context of national emergencies declared by the executive office since 2001. So you're going to see that. There's a little prediction there for you. So when it happens, I can, come back and gloat about it. Others, last on this Senate and House measure situation, there are other conversations. The Democrats aren't quite sure what to say about this deal. Neither are Republicans. I've talked to 2 Republican senators' offices today who have completely different lines and statements that are being provided on what they think about this voice vote in the middle of the night. Democrats are in the same place. Adam Schiff got up in front of the camera and had no idea what to say because there's no line at all about what's going on in the Senate. It's complete chaos.
Late last night, the Senate passed legislation to fund TSA, FEMA, Coast Guard, security at our borders, as well as cybersecurity, and finally get these TSA employees paid.
Which is a thing that Schiff, up to and including last night, consistently turned down and voted against. There was no magical mass measure that Schiff voted on to do any of this before now.
We did not fund ICE because Republicans were unwilling to accept any reforms, even the most basic reforms, to insist that ICE follow the same standards as our local police departments.
So again, despite the fact that that's not remotely true, you have Schiff here making the case that this is somehow now some kind of Democrat victory. I mean, I guess if you're going to call splitting a bill and then having it sent over to the House while Americans still blame this complete disaster on both parties because the Senate's not probably knocking over the filibuster to get these measures through, there's no cohesive line in any way, in any shape or in any form. So let's bring you over to the other side of the argument, which are some of the developing details that we have out of the international situation. Now, really quickly, just about 10 minutes ago, the House Rules Committee approved an 8-4 rule to expedite this 60-day stopgap measure and also to concur the Senate's amendment while adding its own text from the Rules Committee. So essentially, the House has added some amendments, which means the Senate bill is not just going to get stamped and head right to the president's desk. So effectively, the Senate little resolution, a little voice vote thing, it ain't happening, Captain. The Department of Homeland Security is going to remain shut down for the next 2 weeks. Now, that brings us over to the international side of things. So a couple of serious updates. There are major cyber attacks and disinformation campaigns that are coming out of 4 places. So one, the last trickle of misinformation that's coming from actual Iranian regime sources inside of Iran, those are diminishing because there are fewer places for the Iranian regime to broadcast out of. Although they are still continuing to suggest that they've actually nuked all U.S. bases in the region, that everyone is dead, and that Iran also has golden geese that, crap haram gold ingots. So aside from that, there are 3 other places where there's a serious misinformation campaign that you see the United States and other intelligence agencies and investigatory groups and law enforcement agencies around the world focusing in and trying to stop the impact of these. Radio crew, we got to send you over to the commercial. Sorry, that FCC clock's a bit of a pain. We're going to continue on the live stream clock here on the YouTube side of things. It's the Tony Kinnett Cast. Now, the 3 other places would be the Turkish collective, which we're going to tackle here in a second, the Chinese, and then here homegrown in the United States. Here homegrown in the United States. So you have a very weird campaign coming out of Turkey, which is supposed to be a NATO ally, but no. Then, of course, you have the kind of the homegrown arguments and very weird theories from some folks here at home. And then you have the Chinese. So I want to tackle first the cyber attacks because these do directly impact you. So on March 24th, 3 days ago, the European Commission, the EU's executive arm, was hit with a web platform attack. Hackers, which are believed to have been associated with China, targeted cloud infrastructure, hosting essentially the .eu platform, supporting websites and data for the Commission, their Parliament, the Council, other useless European Union bodies. Early findings indicate that data was stolen, probably hundreds of accounts, financial, and probably some diplomatic data from several members of the European Union Parliament. We're not quite sure yet if Chinese hackers were able to access any of the European Union's diplomatic or hard financial data, like access to certain European stock exchanges. But while no attacker has been officially named, two diplomatic cables indicate that China is the likely threat in this particular cyber attack. Now, there are ongoing ransomware and kind of hacktivist activity that are always on the fringes of these. Those don't appear to be coordinated by China. Those are most likely coordinated by the guys that you then call and then yell, "Do not redeem," when you try to put in the gift card codes. That brings us over to the cyber incidents here in the United States. There are claims that an Iranian-linked hacktivist got into FBI Director Kash Patel's personal email. Now, the claims are that the pro-Iranian group Handala Hack Team, which was tied to an earlier Stryker attack, is directly affiliated with the Iranian regime. Some evidence suggests that this hacker group is also closely linked to Turkey. But anyway, this group claims to have breached Patel's personal email account, and then they allegedly published excerpts or photos online. The State Department has responded with a $10 million bounty on the group's leaders. Essentially, you just have a lot of groups that are trying very, very hard to gain any kind of footing that they can over on the cyber attack sphere. Now, on March 11th, there was a major attack on the American medical infrastructure, but it was far less extensive than was originally thought. So 80,000 devices, endpoints, were attacked in a major Microsoft Intune attack attributed to Handala, supposedly in retaliation for U.S. actions against Iran. Recovery is ongoing, however, and no malware has been detected on the connected medical products. So it looks like a small ransomware attack trying to get in on some older hardware. This is one of the reasons, by the way, that Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy is bending over backwards and shouting from every available rooftop about upgrading the United States infrastructure regarding air traffic control, regarding response to FEMA and the emergency action notification system. A huge part of the United States infrastructure that Pete Buttigieg and the Biden administration was supposed to spend billions and billions of dollars upgrading went to building a couple of electric charging stations at a couple of rest stops, and the rest of that money has disappeared. Now, that brings us over to a couple of stories related to fraud here in the United States. We're going to get to that after we cover some more of this international developing news. It's the Tony Kinnett Cast. We got to bring the radio crew back out of commercial. Don't go anywhere.
This is the Tony Kinnett Cast on 93 WIBC.
Welcome back to the Tony Kinnett Cast. Right now, the President of the United States has gone on the record to say that he believes the United States is closer than ever to a Middle East that's free and prosperous, better than ever before. This was the President making that particular statement.
Tonight, we're closer than ever to the rise of the Middle East that is finally free at last from Iranian terror, aggression, and nuclear blackmail. That's what's happened.
Now, there are a couple of things in kind of concert with this. So the American media, which is aggressively stupid at all times, has landed on a comment made by Vice President J.D. Vance in which he made an analogy of individuals who promote suicide bombers really shouldn't have access to nuclear weapons. This was twisted around to the idea that Vice President Vance thought that there were nuclear bombs that essentially like nuclear suicide vests. And that's not what he was saying. So we're going to shoving the children aside for just a second so we can give you some adult updates here on the Operation Epic Fury and the war in the Persian Gulf. The Iranian foreign minister has announced that Israel has hit two of Iran's largest steel factories, these being a power plant and then civilian nuclear sites, among other infrastructure. rather curious to see the Iranian foreign minister coming out immediately and announcing, yes, these attacks happened. Because at this time, what we've seen traditionally from the regime is that they come out and say, everything's fine, no problem. It's that classic Leslie line in front of the burning, exploding hospital. Everything is fine, nothing to fear. Go back to your homes and your business. To see the infrastructure strikes carried out right after the president of the United States said, we're putting a 10-day pause. We had a 5-day pause, really nice pause. We're putting a 10-day pause. We're talking to the right people. The chaos right now inside of the Iranian regime, as the president is trying to put out what appears to be as much diplomatic static and essentially flooding the field with a bunch of different reports and officials saying different things to different media outlets, because they know right now, if someone from the Pentagon texts someone from the Wall Street Journal or the New York Times or the Associated Press or Axios, then Bravak over at Axios will publish it without double checking anything in about 15 minutes. And now the Iranian regime is reading about 15 different reports. That's a bit of a problem for those who are trying to gain open source intelligence. Which is another anecdote for another time. We've gotten a couple of questions asking about OSINT, open source intelligence, and what it is and why I keep seeing those 5 letters all over my social media feed. We might dig into that another time. But to keep everyone on the up-to-date news and information here before we switch over to covering some new fraud news here in the United States, right now, it appears that the Marine expeditionary units are getting ever closer. We're getting to the end of that 5-day travel in window. They are already within CENTCOM's sphere of influence. And very, very likely that Karg Island gets hit pretty soon. It's just very, very likely. Now, the Iranians are what I expect to be doing kind of a plea deal at this moment, kind of begging the president of the United States not to seize Karg Island, and they're doing this in 2 ways, directly and indirectly. So directly, they have released a present. We referenced a present the United States president said that the Iranians had given him. 3 boats carrying or bearing the Pakistani flag to flow big, beautiful boats of oil out of the Strait of Hormuz. The indirect would be a group of people have joined hands and totally not at gunpoint, encircled one of the islands in the Strait of Hormuz to what I can only assume is singing the Farsi version of We Shall Not Be Moved from the Andy Griffith Show. Here you go. So you hear an individual off camera, what I would guess is probably standing next to the cameraman and probably holding a Kalashnikov, shouting out a chant, and then they're all standing there holding arms and chanting, oh, we're all standing as one. We will not fall here at Karg Island. That is very real and not at all at gunpoint whatsoever. Now, to be clear, there are, again, conflicting reports regarding current strikes in Iran. But while we're on the subject of the island seizures, I mentioned the Turkish were throwing a lot of misinformation campaigns into effect. So these huge social media accounts, if you go onto X, you'll see them, will make these really strange claims that immediately get tens of thousands of likes and hundreds of thousands of clicks and views that say some of the most bizarre things that I've ever seen in reporting. One of these, there's this video that I'm not going to play for you because it's just 2 Turkish dudes in collared shirts looking at the camera and saying nonsense. Furkan Gozukara made this huge announcement this afternoon. It said, breaking, U.S. Marines and other sailors are actively revolting. Okay, yeah, sure. Anyway, quote, troops in the 31st Marine Expeditionary Unit and on warships heading to the Middle East are filing emergency conscientious objector claims to stop their deployment. The Pentagon is terrified as the ranks refuse to fight Trump's war. Sources do trust me. There's no evidence of that whatsoever. And there's a same kind of like weird isolationist, hyper-populist line here in the United States that suggests the Trump administration is sending a bunch of Marines against their will to die for Israel. You guys do realize the draft's currently not in place, right? Like those who go to serve the Marines choose to do so. even yours truly, who's worked more closely with private military contracting agencies and civilian contractors, people who choose to go to the Middle East, I know this is going to sound crazy, choose to go there or choose to put themselves under the command of someone who chooses to send them there. I'm not saying that everyone in uniform, conventionals or whether they be contractors, always agree with decisions from the top down, but this like weird idea that you have a bunch of Marines pulling out the Crayolas and instead of eating them, which every Marine deserves a hearty, snack of Crayolas before he's anywhere in the field, it's just scrawling out these emergency conscientious I object to being deployed. You think that Marines aren't excited about the idea of burning through the IRGC in Iran? That they're not looking forward, perhaps I know I talked to one of those particular Marines in the 31st 2 days ago. The idea that they might be looking forward a little bit to the idea of payback for dead Marines by Hezbollah and Iran. Some of you guys need to actually, as a YouTube member and a Marine points out, he says, as a Marine myself, we love taking over islands. You guys need to introduce yourself to some jarheads though. Don't just trust some weird Turkish dude saying everyone is dying and it's terrible and they're all revolting. It's mutiny everywhere. I don't know how troops are doing things in the IRGC. Or maybe we do actually, because we now have footage showing that several IRGC effectors, Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps defectors, are trying to liberate small towns and doing these short drive-bys. Now, this is a rather violent clip, but I think that we're able to play a portion that isn't too graphic here. There are uprisings now with some of the weapons that have either been confiscated or snuck in, and IRGC vehicles are being shot up openly, broad daylight in the streets. So here's why this is effective. First of all, the prevailing authority, and this is, by the way, why the United States is not going to go in and occupy anything here. So there are all these claims that Trump is going to send in the troops and he's going to occupy the country and he's going to bring in Nikki Haley and make her queen of Iran. And it's not, no, don't be dumb. Why is this an effective strategy for the people of Iran? The IRGC, who is now running so thin that they are drafting 12-year-olds, has to drive around constantly in technicals, pickup trucks with machine guns on the top of them. And they have to be official IRGC branded, trademark, registered logo trucks. They have to be because they're official regime vehicles. Well, for guerrilla warfare, that makes you a real swell target. And I do so not regret to inform you that IRGC pickup trucks are a lot less bulletproof than when US troops are in a particular region. So things are not going super well for the IRGC. The Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps has now announced, after they had just opened the Strait of Hormuz, they've now announced again that it is super duper closed to any ships not explicitly granted permission by Tehran, and they're turning away some Chinese container ships, 3 of them. I don't know why everything is being done in threes at the moment, but a lot of conflicting reports regarding the Strait of Hormuz. Russia has also decided to just throw in a little extra chaos to the mix. We are now receiving information that Russia has decided to impose a complete gas export ban on its oil producers for 4 months, starting from April 1st. Very unlikely that they include China in this export ban. This is probably over to Europe and trying very, very hard to do their best to kind of squeeze the stock market and kind of box Trump into a really tight position. The idea is that they can outlast the United States regarding oil infrastructure, regarding the market, then they'll succeed. The problem is that a lot of these things are telegraphed as really, really, really obvious. When Russia comes out and announces all of a sudden that they're trying this maneuver, I don't necessarily think it's going to make the play that you're looking for here. And this brings us over to the Captain Supreme of NATO, Mark Rutte, who's trying very desperately to get the Europeans not to piss off the President of the United States any more than they already have. So you had Friedrich Merz of Germany today, who came out and made a silly little announcement that I suppose sounded tough at the time. that, the president has no plan. We're big and strong and tough. We're Europe. We're monitoring the situation from afar. Friedrich Merz, Germany. We're very, very important.
Hat mir 2-3 Mal in diesem Gespräch.
He said, Trump said to me 2 or 3 times during this conversation,
Halbe Stunde gedauert, gesagt,
which lasted half an hour.
Okay.
I don't necessarily need NATO.
Dann wiederum auch jetzt öffentlich erklärt, dass es nicht gut war, dass wir.
And then Merz responded, well, you've said you don't need NATO, so then we're going to stay completely out of it. So the president announced that he didn't need NATO to go in and participate on the strikes, but given that Germany benefits from the oil flowing out of the Strait of Hormuz, yeah, Germany could do a little something in this particular instance. And it's caused a lot of European and NATO leaders, like Friedrich Merz, to decide they can just sit back and go, well, you didn't really consult with us, and so we're going to, stay completely out of this. Secretary of State Marco Rubio, and then, of course, the President of the United States have said, well, then, you guys have begged us on hand and baguette foot to send all of this money and weaponry over to Ukraine. Why? As the president said, to protect you from Russia. Gee, it would be a real shame if Europe had to do all of that work on their own. So I'm really for the President of the United States, the Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, who, by the way, is in no way a kind of a populist or an isolationist, to just say, you know what, Europe, you're so cocky, you go ahead and handle Ukraine then. You have Zelensky coming to you and begging for money every 15 seconds. Radio crew, I'm getting an idea. I think we're a little away from your commercial break. We'll catch you guys on the flip side. It's the Tony Kinnett Cast here on the Daily Signal. All right. In the meantime side of things, I want to switch over to some of this bewildering fraud news. So, of course, Vice President Vance of the United States, he's been made like the fraud czar. And this particular fraud czar, again, issues that Americans care about. He's pretty on the money here. This was the vice president today.
Here's the basic problem that we've had in this government going back for probably 30 or 40 years, is that you've never had an administration that has really taken this seriously until the president put us really from day one of the Trump administration, who said, we have to take the fraud issue seriously. And a lot of the anti-fraud protections that existed in our government for a very long time were actually turned off by the Biden administration. So we think fraud has been a problem for a long time. It became a massive, massive problem under the Biden administration. We're going to do a number of things. First of all, we're going to turn back on those anti-fraud protections so that all of these cabinet officials are looking at what's going on and focusing on it.
This is a very big deal if you don't have federal judges that have done what they have so effectively so far, which is essentially, and we're going to talk about this with the chair of the Minnesota Fraud Prevention Committee from the Minnesota State Legislature here in a couple of minutes. Essentially, what you have the vice president saying is, hey, we're going to give these federal agency secretaries and deputy or assistant secretaries the ability to turn off the faucet. Well, these federal judges, James Boasberg, Paula Zinnis, Goofy Goober, whoever, Rufus McDoofus, they decide, well, I'm from the district of who cares, and I announce you need to start giving the money. Even if there's money flowing to fraud, you can't possibly turn off the funding. And as, again, we're going to talk about here with the Minnesota official here in a couple of seconds, well, it turns out that the fraud only increases when you do that. The vice president's trying to stem this particular flow.
The second thing is that we're going to take a whole of government approach. So much of what's going to make the anti-fraud task force work is that we're communicating across different departments. So when Bobby Kennedy is talking to Scott Bessent about things that he's seeing in Medicare and Medicaid, when Scott is seeing things at Treasury, when Brooke is seeing things at Agriculture, when Scott is seeing things at Housing and Urban Development, what we're going to actually do is force the bureaucracy to take this seriously and work together as political principles to make sure that we stop allowing fraudsters to steal the American people's money. And that brings me to my final point before I'll kick it over to Andrew, who is leading.
So all in all, what the vice president is saying here is kind of frauds are excellent, and I'm thrilled to see this, but it's not going to be as effective as it could be without the House of Representatives impeaching certain federal judges who stopped fraud from being funded, or who force fraud to be funded, I should say, these particular judges. And then on the other side, you also have the Senate who refuses to do anything. I do think that before we get to the end of this election cycle, I do think at this point the filibuster will fall. I think it will, because I don't see anything right now in a manner that Republicans can actually push through things the American people want to see as actual deliverables without breaking the filibuster. I don't see it. If we're already focused on election side, I'm not seeing it. We're going to swing over, pick up the radio crew, and then talk a little bit more about California, Minnesota fraud. A lot of news. It's the Tony Kinnett Cast.
This is the Tony Kinnett Cast on 93 WIBC.
Pleasure to be joined by Kristen Robbins, the chair of the Minnesota Fraud Prevention Committee, voted the most likely committee to be exhausted at the end of the year so far. Kristen, how's it going?
It's great. Thank you for having me.
Well, I'll just kick it right to you. Give us some of the latest updates on the fraud scandal that just appears not to stop.
It really does, which is unfortunate. I do think we found most of the vectors of fraud, but I still continue to get new whistleblower reports, which is stunning. But this week, the committee focused on the amount of cash flying out of the Minneapolis-St. Paul airport. TSA had done a study in January announcing that $350 million had flown out of our airport last year.
Good night.
Cash. Which is 99
cash. 350 million in cash.
Yeah, more than $1 million a day in cash out of our airport, and that's 99% higher than the amount of cash leaving much bigger airports like LAX and JFK. So this is a stunning amount, and it was up from the year before, which was 343 million. But when this first all came to light a decade ago, they were guessing the estimate was 100 million in cash back in 2015, 2016. So it's tripled. And I think most Minnesotans were, including myself, until the report came out, we were totally unaware. We kind of thought that had settled down after the childcare fraud, but clearly it's escalated. So we need to get a handle on it.
This is one of the reasons that we wanted to have you on the show, because a lot of people have believed that, well, since we found the source of the fraud, there was a big national scandal about it, or we found the source of some of the fraud. Well, matter solved. We'll do a little press conference. We'll say we're arresting people day and night. Everyone will be fine. And from your committee's, again, your analysis of these whistleblower reports, your further review of these TSA studies, the fraud is, I hate to use the overused term here, like the tip of the iceberg, but this appears to be fairly apropos.
Absolutely. No, we are still trying to get our arms around it. And what's also disturbing is, despite all the national attention, all the hearings, testifying before Congress, not only me, but Governor Walz and our AG Ellison, there's been so much attention, but it's still happening. Our OLA, Office of Legislative Auditor, released a report last week about kickbacks that were still happening. In January, they released a report about DHS officials who had falsified and backdated documents. So in real time, despite all this pressure, there's still malfeasance and criminal activity going on. It's stunning.
Ma'am, this is one of the things that I believe that so many in the trades have a better grip on than those of us kind of in the academic and the political fields, because I don't know if you've ever had a leak from a sink, or maybe you've been working on, either the bathroom or the kitchen, water starts to run out. You, and again, millions of Americans know, as soon as water starts coming out, what do? You shut the water off. And when the federal government attempted to do this through a couple of different levers, the Department of the Treasury, all the way over to the U.S. Department of Agriculture with Secretary Rollins, to just stem momentarily the funding, immediately lawsuits came flying out as quick as I think I've seen them at the federal level, that the water, or in this case, the funding, shouldn't stop flowing in just because there's more holes in this than a colander regarding fraud.
Right. No, we have to stop it. And thankfully, we did fully stop the housing stabilization program. So that's the first time we've actually stopped funding an entire program. But they flagged 14 programs for high risk fraud. So
1 out of 13.
We have a lot to still stop here, and taxpayers are so fed up. I mean, they work so hard for their money, and to see it being flown out of the country and used to buy an apartment in Nairobi and a resort in Kenya, they are furious. So we need to stop it.
Wait a minute. I'm sorry. I would be remiss if I didn't point out when you say, Nairobi, when you talk about Kenya, Kenya was the country that we had given the responsibility of vetting incoming Somali migrants for at least a decade and a half. And that brings me to Attorney General Ellison and the discarded view of whistleblowers. I'm a former whistleblower from the Indianapolis public school system a couple of years ago. And I've seen from Ellison's office, and then, of course, himself from the podium, when there are issues brought up about whistleblowers, not just Republican or conservative whistleblowers, but Democrats, moderate and progressive, all the way over to independents and libertarians that have worked at some form in local or state Minnesota government. And the way that these reports are casually, flippantly discarded as being worthless because they might paint the administration itself in an unfair light. What do you think that this does to future whistleblower reports? Have they changed how these reports have come into, again, your fraud prevention committee?
Yeah, so when they originally shut down the original whistleblowers on the childcare fraud, it had an incredible chilling effect. And whistleblowers will tell me that. Like, they were afraid to come forward because a couple people had been made of an example. They were fired. They were trespassed from the building. Like, it was very public and very stressful. And so whistleblowers saw that and they didn't want that to happen to them. So they stopped whistleblowing. But now we expanded whistleblower protection. So not only can they get protection, before it was they only got protection if they reported to their supervisor or to the attorney general. That was not working. So now we've expanded it. They can report to legislators or the OLA or to law enforcement. And so now that they have other places to report, we're seeing hundreds of whistleblowers. So it is working, and I just encourage them to be brave. Yes, keep coming forward. We need you. You're going to help us solve this.
Please forgive me for interjecting as you answer some of these questions. The scale, even past the initial fraud reports, which were by no means small potatoes, it's baffling. I mean, obviously, it's incredibly upsetting to both the federal taxpayer and, of course, Minnesotans inside that tax region in and of itself. Kind of as a last question here, we often get to a point of what needs to happen coming out of these kind of investigations, and there is a desire to pick up the pitchfork and the torch, or maybe for the official to just pass the buck on to another agency or just to Congress very vaguely in general. Fraud prevention, not only from the investigatory side, but also in the measures to keep these things happening in the future. What do you think needs to begin to happen, even if it's a very informal list, to start rectifying these major gaps in how the taxpayers and also the safety of Minnesotans have been treated here?
I mean, the most important thing we need is a new governor who's going to change the culture. Because for 20 years, there's been a culture that tolerated fraud, that looked the other way. And we need someone who's going to fire people, who's going to clean house in these agencies, and who's going to standardize internal controls so that a dollar doesn't go out unless people know the recipient exists, the provider exists, that they're eligible to provide the services, that services are actually being provided. It is not rocket science. They are missing the most obvious things. Like, does the provider exist? A lot of them are just fake addresses that have been submitted on paper. So we have to get back to the basics of standard internal controls that our small businesses and our regular Minnesotans do every day.
Kind of got a house full of crazy kids. The parents got to step up and kind of take charge, kind of an idea. I respect that. I do. I think that's a definitely good first step. Kristen Robbins, I wish we had more time on this. We'd love to have you back soon with any additional updates. We hope that you remain safe, your whistleblowers as well. Thank you very much for giving us a couple of updates.
Thank you for having me. Have a great day.
All right, let's cover just over on the outside of broadcast hour section of the show a little bit more news that we are able to confirm now. Multiple sources are confirming that there are at least 10 U.S. servicemen that are injured. Again, right now, we do not know the extent of those injuries on the Iranian attack on the Saudi U.S. base. We also are aware that right now the entire UAE Ministry of Defense has been mobilized. Air defenses, fighter aircraft are trying to deal with another wave of certain kinds of Iranian cruise missiles and drones. So we're trying to keep you up to date on that if there's any update for it. On the House bill side of things, Speaker Johnson just spoke over on Fox News, giving a bit of an update to what he believes is going to be the House's path forward this evening. So we have that clip ready for you here. Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson, just a little bit ago.
What's the House going to do?
Well, in a couple of hours, a little after 10 p.m. tonight, we will pass the clean continuing resolution. Very important, Brian. No partisan gimmicks or tricks here. We didn't add things to it. Just a clean continuation of funding for Department of Homeland Security, 10 agencies beneath it. All those agencies keep Americans safe to make sure we can stay on track. And in those 8 weeks, we will figure this out with Democrats and figure out a couple of reforms or whatever they need to make sure that we do this right. But we are going to protect the homeland. We have to. It's the most important, most basic function of Congress, and Democrats don't want to do that.
All right, so you're going to look to pass that, a simple majority. Have you talked to Hakeem Jeffries? Is he on board with that, or do I have to even ask that question?
Well, I would assume, I certainly hope that some Democrats come along with us tonight. I'm assuming that they will vote no because, again, they advocate for open borders and they don't want enforcement. They would keep those departments completely unfunded, and that's what they've demonstrated by their actions and their antics in the Congress. Their actions speak for themselves. The upcoming election, Brian, is a contrast for America between common sense and crazy. And the Democrats give us new exhibits and illustrations every single day of how crazy their policies are and, frankly, how dangerous.
Mr. Speaker.
All right, so we'll keep you updated on that. The House is coming for a quick vote to adjourn, then they're going to come back at about 10, that side of things. A couple of other pieces of news that we haven't really had a chance to get to today. The House Ethics Committee has found Democrat Representative Sheila Scherfilis-McCormick guilty of 25 ethics charges after she was indicted for stealing millions in FEMA funds to end her campaign. Now, again, I got to ask, why is it that here we are with Representative Stacey Plaskett, who is on camera taking direct orders from Jeffrey Epstein? Democrat Representative Stacey Plaskett taking live orders and questions from Jeffrey Epstein after he was convicted of sex trafficking when she was questioning Trump officials. Why is she still in Congress? What about Representative LaMonica McIver, who is on camera she's indicted for body slamming Immigration Customs Enforcement and federal agents. And of course, just reported on Sheila Scherfilis-McCormick, $5 million in FEMA fraud, Democrat Representative Veronica Escobar, a staffer who impersonated an attorney at an ICE facility in order to smuggle cell phones to detainees. Why are these 4 members of Congress still in the House of Representatives? What's the deal? A member of Jasmine Crockett's security detail who was shot by law enforcement for impersonating law enforcement. Where are all of these things? Of course, why would you actually see any action taken on those? We're still doing our influencer videos and other nonsense. And again, lest you think that this was just maybe a passing fad and it's on its way out, know those who are currently running for big House seats in the midterms are doing the exact same kind of stuff. Bree Woodson, Democrat down in Georgia, went on an unhinged rant because she saw a Charlie Kirk banner. There you go.
DC. This is the Department of Education. Charlie Kirk has a banner at the Department of Education. Mind you.
Breathe. It's not healthy for someone of your size to hyperventilate like this. It's quite dangerous. You do not appear to have the cholesterol required for unhinged rants in this particular fashion. But she did say mind me, so maybe I'm going to get a little education here outside the DO ed.
I have 8 letters behind my last name. Charlie Kirk never earned a postgraduate degree of any kind.
Okay, so the unhinged rant, she says, she's like, he has a banner on the Department of Education, okay? She says, I have 8 letters behind my name, which I assume she means like she has some degree letters that are stapled on to the back of your name by really pretentious and annoying people after you get a couple of graduate degrees or postgraduate degrees. Oh, that's her idea for what it means to get your own banner somewhere, which makes sense, by the way. Only people who have a lot of graduate degrees are so obsessed with seeing their name all over everything all the time with a bunch of extra stuff just for completing a graduate program. They want you to pat them on the back for completing school. I mean, the unhinged music behind it is not doing her any favors. Again, just to,
Same. Charlie Kirk never earned a postgraduate degree of any kind. I have a couple.
Okay.
But he's on the Department of Education. This is white supremacist propaganda.
It's white supremacy. Yes, see, because he doesn't have the degrees that this random chick that I've never heard of before, and none of you have ever heard of before. She has gotten out here, and she's all mad. She's like, because he doesn't have the letters.
Welcome to America.
Welcome to America. Okay, so I have some letters behind my name too. I have 2 very worthless and useless Masters of Education degrees, one in curriculum development, one in education technology from Ball State University, and they are both worth absolutely nothing. I don't need you to put Tony Kinnett, m.a.ed, m.a.ed. I don't need that. You can just call me Tony. Or you can just sit down and calm down. But again, this is the crew. We're bringing the next crew up, ready to yell and scream. Now, on the fraud side of things, the other thing the Democrats are running on is just more fraud. So we've got abolishing ICE. We've got yelling about Charlie Kirk banners. Good, great, grand, excellent. We've got being charged and found liable in major defraud of federal agencies, FEMA schemes. And now we've got calling for more fraud. So you remember Gavin Newsom came out right after, you remember that Zoran Mamdani came out right after the initial Tim Walz fraud about all of the childcare fraud that was unearthed again, over all of the immigrant fraud that was unearthed again, the Medicare and Medicaid fraud that was unearthed again. And Zoran Mamdani announced with AOC that they were going to promote this exciting new, anyone can access it, even especially illegal immigrants, for childcare and health care and all of these other kinds of care. And it was just going to be the government throwing money at you endlessly ad nauseum. So much that New York Governor Kathy Hochul had to get out in front of the crowd and say, hey, can you billionaires please move back and pay for these programs? Well, now Gavin Newsom has decided that, see, he can't have Zoran Mamdani stealing his thunder. He's got to get out there and he's got to promote even bigger programs and even more fraud and even more of your money going to airports flying out of the country. Here's Gavin.
To the extent there is another elected official that's done universal health care regardless of pre-existing conditions, ability to pay, and regardless of your immigration status, where I'm attacked often, we delivered it. I don't know any other elected official that's done $25 minimum wage for healthcare workers, $20 minimum wage for fast food workers, that created child savings accounts for 5.5 million Californians well before the Trump accounts were conceived. It's pretty progressive record, and we don't even get into low carbon green growth, the environmental record, what I'll put up against anyone. So I'm very proud of that. At the same time, I don't think you have to be profligate to be progressive. And I don't think being, you can't sort of argue to be pro-job and anti-business. I have a different lived experience as a progressive but pragmatic politician.
Okay, that's real special. So first of all, congratulations to the Axio show on finally having a show that had numbers somewhere remotely close to ours. Congratulations. I'm sure that's very thrilling for you. But, I know you guys have to get back to your, whopping episodes with 446 views. So Gavin Newsom gets out there and makes the case that you can be both as progressive and outrageous and promising all of the free stuff for Bernie Sanders. You can be Bernie Sanders, but you can also be like a real casual, good-looking dude who can come out there and be one of the people. Okay? We've tried this campaign so many times, have we not? Have we not tried the Kamala Harris style, I'm going to pretend to be moderate while also appealing to the extremely progressive wackadoodles who will just, again, go right out onto the House floor and they will proclaim loudly that they want to cut everything down, burn it all down. They don't care. They hate the country. You have open riotous protesters all over who are chanting insane, bonkers things like cheering for the caskets of U.S. soldiers. And this is going to be the maneuver? This is going to be the move? This is what we're shuffling in to do? Again, personally, I don't see that as effective. But leave it to Republicans to take a solution in which you really should be doing some things to deliver, so that then all of this garbage is, thrown down and made fun of, and, you actually do decently in the midterms. No, well, we're going to do this whining voice vote nonsense because, again, you're terrified of the idea that if you break the filibuster, what? Then when Democrats get in power, they're going to break the filibuster? They're doing that anyway. So, thrilling stuff. Genuinely thrilling stuff at the moment to watch over on the House and the Senate side of things. Now, a little bit of extra news for you this evening. A little bonus on the bonus tona side of things. So, first of all, Jill Biden had a Secret Service agent who shot himself Barney Fife style in an airport today. So while accompanying the former First Lady through a Philadelphia airport, we're now finding out, according to Real Clear Politics, that this agent was fumbling around after forgetting his cell phone in his SUV and shot himself in the leg. He was only on the job for a week with the Jill Biden detail, was in the SUV behind the one that Joe Biden was traveling in. He left to accompany Joe Biden through the airport and then realized he forgot his cell phone. The agent rushed back to get it, and his pistol fell out of the holster and was lying on the seat. And while grabbing his pistol quickly, he negligently fired it as he was trying to put it back in its holster. Oh my God, it's literally Barney Fife. It's literally, Andy, I don't know what I was doing. Like just trying to, oh my gosh. So the agent shot his, not his butt cheek, because, of course, went to the hospital where he is recovering and expected to be released later today. Now, I will break a little bit of form here and read one comment that I find to be particularly hilarious from a lady over on X by the name of Mrs. Missouri. Quote, I would shoot myself in the ass too to avoid spending time with Dr. Joe Biden, end quote. That's a good one. That's correct. I like that. So excellent stuff. All right, over to some of the mail time things, because it's been a long week. There has been a lot of exhausting nonsense that has been shoved in every single one of our faces. So I wanted to take a moment to get a couple of questions answered that you've thrown my way. We've kind of been pushing some back here before we shuffle out for, hopefully, the weekend. The very, very kind super chat from Crystal Raven Jones, $5. You guys do not have to give super chats to get questions answered. You can throw those over in the Discord, or, of course, over in the live chat. We'll try to get to them. We'll try to find all of them. So Crystal says, how many states have provisions for the recall of elected officials? Can some of these idiot senators be removed that way? Well, I hate to let you in on a little secret there, that ever since the 17th Amendment passed, senators have been directly elected positions by every state of the union. And for a majority of states, that means their state constitutions were written before that amendment of the U.S. Constitution passed. Meaning this, there's no special recall provision that's baked into the cake there. Because they are elected by people, I think there are very few, if any, states or commonwealths that allow for a senator recall election. No, unfortunately, this is something that requires people to be vigilant, outside of just when senators are in the headlines. You have to bookmark and remember these events. And then when it's primary season for your senator, because again, they have a 6-year term, then they come around and they say, hey, I did all of this for you. You actually have to get someone in who is better and who is not either an 89-year-old person barely alive and is going to flip-flop when their staffer Googles something, or having an actual crazy person who is going to Matt Gaetz their way out of a position, or Marjorie Taylor Greene, and essentially scream like a cuckoo clock mixed with a jack-in-the-box. So you actually got to have like a third option, somebody who's a lot better. And that's easier said than done, right? Because a lot of representatives are only representatives until they can run for the Senate, and a lot of senators are just waiting around until it's time to make a bid for the presidency. So moving from there, Saintly Beginnings, a very kind $5 super chat, said, hey, if Immigration, Customs Enforcement, and Border Patrol are funded through 2027 to 2029, then why does it matter that the Senate didn't fund them? Because House and Senate funding, when Congress funds something, they are funded in a couple of ways. So they are funded both in general budget, and then they are also funded in special projects. The hiring of new agents is needed, and continual funding apparatus that say, hey, I know this is only funded through here. We are going to keep funding this. And so it's true that ICE and Border Patrol have already been given very specific allotments just for those agencies through the big beautiful bill, or those sub-agencies. However, when the House goes through and allots specific funding for agencies, they don't always go through and break up by department. They say, we are funding the Department of Homeland Security in full. What the Democrats wanted to do is say, we're going to tie up a bunch of funding by suggesting, well, actually, we're going to put a bunch of provisions and asterisks on what we want ICE and Border Patrol to do in order to fund the Department of Homeland Security as a whole. Like, the House doesn't actually go through and Microsoft Excel spreadsheet all of these individual agencies. They fund the agency based on a list of costs expected from each individual sub-agency. So when Republicans say Democrats literally threw on the brakes, it's not that all of these individual sub-agencies are individually funded. They're not. That's what the Democrats now want to do because they want to pick and choose what they want to fund. But no, that's not how this was supposed to be set up. And so they threw a big performative fit. So it matters the Senate didn't fund them because it wasn't about the not funding. It was that Senate said, hey, we're throwing the brakes on funding the Department of Homeland Security in general. Like, we know we're not going to fund the TSA. And everyone from Adam Schiff all the way over to Chuck Schumer have made it clear they knew this is what they were doing. Said every day is better for us. We're happy to do this. Because we do not want, well, you heard Schumer's words were Trump's militia or whatever to continue gaining whatever. Essentially, they're just lying about how the process works. So that's part of that. From RC0, what will the European Union do when America leaves NATO? I don't expect that you're going to see the president just turn around and leave NATO. What I expect is going to happen is that you're just going to see the president of the United States announce that a bunch of NATO operational facilities will remain operational. The United States is just not going to commit to funding and arming those particular bases. Say no, because there are a lot of NATO missions that do operate in buffer states that aren't NATO troops. And so essentially the president's saying, fine, you take care of Ukraine then. Ukraine's not a NATO state. No, you take care of it. I think that's probably what will end up driving them to the bargaining line, which is why you may have Macron who gets out there and says, no, we're not going to help those filthy Americans, but also has the Charles de Gaulle, their aging, crappy aircraft carrier, which is sailing closer to the Middle East. From Truth Matters 8241, well, if the Senate is going to be in recess, does that mean that President Trump can make recess appointments? Senate Majority Leader John Thune actually has to play along a little bit there and allow recess appointments, which he's not going to do, which I personally don't like. I think that we have really gotten to the point where if Congress is going to pretend to be a powerless organization sometimes, but then also demand to be taken seriously at other times, you can't have it both ways. I don't care for that. And I don't care for that no matter what branch is doing it. I don't care for it when the judicial branch acts really political and then says, stop threatening us like we're political. We're not. No, you can't have it both ways. And the same way when the president of the United States gets out there and claims responsibility for something and then turns around and says, well, he has nothing to do with that. Well, no, you got to do it both ways. If you're going to claim success for everything, you also have to claim the defeats as well. And there's no executive branch ever, going all the way back to the beginning, that is willing to take politically defeats along with successes or with victories. It's not something that happens. On one super chat from Deanne McIntosh, a very kind $10 super chat, says, off the subject, you look better with the blue t-shirt. You don't look like Tucker Carlson now. Thanks for all you do to make America great. I've received a couple of compliments, I guess, on the t-shirt under the blazer, as opposed to wearing the collared shirt. I am from the Midwest, meaning I did not grow up with like the trendy t-shirt under the blazer. That was not a thing for a long time. Maybe we'll throw some of those things in there. I don't know. I don't have like a bunch of fancy, nicer t-shirts. I don't even know what I would be called if I started wearing graphic tees underneath blazers. That's not one of mine. We'll talk about it. We'll think about it. We'll put a marketing team. We'll put a congressional committee on it. And then 8 months and $800 billion later, we won't change anything, but we'll tell you we've delivered with slightly more stylish dress shirts underneath. All right, I think that on that end, we've had a pretty good week of good shows. Appreciate you guys tuning in. If you wouldn't mind doing so, feel free to subscribe to the channel if you're not already. Also, a like on the channel in the description of the video. Giving us a 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts really helps us out on that side. We'll be back with you on Monday, 7 p.m. Eastern, unless there's some type of big, huge breaking live news over the weekend, in which case we'll join you then. It's the Tony Kinnett Cast here on the Daily Signal, nationally syndicated, first on 93 WIBC. Y'all, take care. Hang on a second here. Wait a second. Hold on. There has been a major piece of news that I haven't even been able to address yet. My goodness, all of the other breaking stuff, and I haven't even gotten to a major story. Tiger Woods has been arrested for drunk driving. Goodness gracious. Poor producer Daniel is going to have to go edit that stuff out so that we can make sure that we do indeed, in fact, absolutely cover that Tiger Woods has been arrested for drunk driving. I believe we have a clip from the law enforcement down in Florida who has now talked a little bit about this. Here you go.
DUI investigators came to the scene here, and Mr. Woods did exemplify signs of impairment. They did several tests on him. Of course, he did explain the injuries and the surgeries that he had. We did take that into account. But they did do some in-depth roadside tests. And when it was determined, he was placed under arrest and taken to the Martin County Jail. At the Martin County Jail, and even on scene, we really weren't suspicious of alcohol being involved in this case, and that proved to be true at the jail. So Mr. Woods did a breathalyzer test, blew 000s. But when it came time for us to ask for a urinalysis test, he refused, and so he's been charged with DUI, with property damage, and refusal to submit to a lawful test.
Okay, so we're getting some information that maybe Tiger Woods was on narcotics instead of being drunk. Either way, DWI, DUI, whatever, he was under the influence of something, very likely, and flipped his vehicle. Now, I will say this. The president of the United States was asked about this. He wished him well, said he hadn't heard anything. Fair. I will point this out. This is now Tiger Woods' third crash. This is his third car accident of this nature. So I think the experts are asking the appropriate question here. We need to start looking at Tiger Woods and asking, is he a woman? This many car accidents in a row. I'm starting to question just what gender Tiger Woods might be. I think we need to stop and, ask a serious question there. So either way, I think at some point, as our producer Jen pointed out, perhaps it's time that he starts shopping for a different kind of driver. Hey, I'd say that's worth a good sitcom, good sitcom laugh. So either way, fun way to go into the weekend. Guys, don't drive drunk, don't drive high, don't make bad decisions. Also, if you're that wealthy, you should probably be aware that you're going to make national news if you decide to be extra stupid. All right, that said, now we're done. Have a wonderful evening. It's the Tony Kinnett Cast here on the Daily Signal.